This is the Rod Langway Fan Club.
Welcome, everybody, to the Rod Langway Fan Club podcast. I am your host, Jeff Roman. This is our 2025 Stretch Run Report. I'm with a couple of co-hosts, Mr. Mark Czeknita.
Spring is officially here. Playoff races are heating up, and I'm fired up.
And John Snowden. Johnny, what are you playing with there?
I just got one of these little stretchy guys you get from the gumball machines, just stretching them out a little bit. I'm looking forward to the show, though.
All right. We have an exciting show for you guys.
Yeah, we've got a new segment. It's called Stretch Marks. We're going to hand out grades to each of the playoff competitors based on their likelihood of making the playoffs this year.
Yes, we are less than a month away from the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's always an exciting time, especially to see which teams are going to sneak in at the end here. So let's break it down. Where would we like to begin?
Let's start in the East. And there's a real race going on.
Yes, let's start with the Ottawa Senators. They are holding down the first wildcard spot. Looks like they're in, guys, right?
I would agree with that. There's a lot of excitement in the nation's capital. It's been a long time coming for this team. But guys, I would give them a 90% chance of making it here.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with you there. 90% seems about right. I mean, they do finally have their goalie with Linus Ullmark. We talked about this at the start of the year. Of course, some questions because goalies have often gone there to die, but he seems to be the real deal there.
Mark,
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I like the bold move they made at the deadline, upgrading their team. I think that Dylan Cousins trade is going to be a real shot in the arm for them. I know Josh Norris was having a pretty good year, but I see Cousins as a clear upgrade, especially at this time of year when play gets physical. So yeah, I think I agree with you guys. 90% chance. It would take a catastrophe for them to drop out of this spot.
Love that they added Zetterlund to that team. I know he's not playing too high in the lineup right now, but I think he could be a great addition to Chuck and Stützle.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, well, Kachuk's a little bit banged up after the Four Nations Cup, but he's in the lineup. He's going to be gutting it out. And yeah, Tim Stützle is one of those scary guys that can go end to end at any point. I also really like what I'm seeing from Jake Sanderson. He's emerged as a clear-cut number one defenseman in the NHL.
Great times to be an Ottawa Senators fan.
Finally, Marky, your Montreal Canadiens, they are currently sitting in a playoff spot. Is this sustainable? Can they make it?
Yeah, you know, when Caden Gooley went down a few weeks ago, I thought that was the final blow to this team. Right before the deadline, Nick Suzuki actually went to the general manager, Kent Hughes, and basically pleaded to keep this team together. Ken said, show me what you guys have. You have to prove it to me. They won 5 games in a row. They kept the team together, and they are flying right now. The team looks strong. Gooley's skating again, so they might even get another boost here before it's all said and done.
What has been the secret in Montreal?
Well, I think it's the same story with Lane Hudson being just an absolute breakout star in his first year in the league, and the first line.
Yes.
Nick Suzuki, the captain, leading the charge, 18 points in his last 11 games. And Slavkovsky is also looking like he's returning to the form that we saw at the end of last season, being a physical presence in front of the net. Cole Caulfield, who might pot 40. That first line's been dynamite.
Yeah, and the reclamation project for Patrick Laine, how is this proceeding? I think it's doing okay. I mean, he's obviously a very good power play performer. If he can get his 5-on-5 play sort of up to snuff and maybe do a little back checking now and again, I think he may really contribute to their run here.
I'll be watching in net. Now, Montembeault's been pretty solid this season. They've got the kid, the backup, Dobash, and I know in Montreal they do love a rookie goalie.
Yeah, sure. Shades of Patrick Waugh, maybe not, but he has solidified the position, maybe pushed Montembeault a little bit as well. And back to your point, John, on Laine, I agree. The back checking, maybe not a strength, but in the past couple of games here, he's been playing hungrier, playing physically. And if this is a sign of what's to come in the stretch run for Montreal, this can be another big boost for them.
Yeah, lots of buzz in Montreal.
Yeah, the Bell Center is electric.
So let's get those stretch marks in for Montreal. Guys, I'm going to give them about a 40% chance.
Okay, why 40?
I'm just a little bit of questions on depth for me. I feel like they're a really top-heavy team.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, because actually I think that their bottom 6 is a really strong part of their team. It's the second line that's been letting them down. Alex Newhook is now in that spot with Kirby Dach injured. That's probably the biggest question mark for them.
So what's your mark?
You know what? I'm going to go 50-50. 50% chance they get in. They're in a pretty good spot. They're playing well. The fans are behind them. I think there's a real chance here.
I do like Anderson and Gallagher. Great stories.
Yeah, absolutely. They're sort of vibe guys, especially Brendan Gallagher. And right now, I think it's all about vibes in Montreal. I'm going to give them a little bit higher than you guys, actually. I really like what I'm seeing. I'm going to say 55%
Whoa,
chance.
okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, let's move on to the New York Rangers. I think one of the biggest shocks this year is that they are fighting for their playoff lives after having looked like a Stanley Cup contender the past few years. Jeff, is this the Rollerman curse again?
Guys, I did redo my Stanley Cup pick, but I did say I'm not counting the Rangers out for the playoffs. And actually, I think they have a higher chance of getting in than Montreal. Believe it or not, I'm going to put them at 50%. That JT Miller trade, I think it was great.
Yeah, no doubting he's been a great player for them so far. Point a game, physical presence, bringing some emotion into that locker room. I also like the fact that Adam Fox is back healthy, their most important defenseman by far. And of course, when you got Igor Shesterkin, you've always got a chance. But there's something a little bit off with this team. You look at the other night, getting 13 shots on net against Calgary in a very disappointing home loss. I don't know, I have a bad feeling about this team. And because of that, I'm going to put them at 40%.
Right. Well, there is no doubting the talent on this squad. All of the guys you just mentioned, they're excellent performers. This team is underperforming. There's still a bit of a stink, I feel, around this team from what happened with Jacob Trouba and all of that stuff at the beginning of the year. And I got to say, I'm really not a believer in Peter Laviolette. Yeah, I don't know. There's just something about that guy, especially when things start to go south for teams. So I think they still have a chance based on talent alone. But, I'm going to put them a little bit below Montreal. I'm going to say 45% for the New York Rangers.
Next, let's talk about the New York Islanders. Now, last year, guys, I don't know if you remember this, but we more or less wrote them off in our stretch run report, and they ended up making the playoffs. So they have made us look silly before. Does this team still have a shot?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been writing this team off for the past decade.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm pretty close to writing them off this year. You look at Matthew Barzal, still injured, not sure when he'll be back. And also Brock Nelson, their best goal scorer, traded away. This is a team that already struggled to score. I just don't see how they get enough goals to get in there. I'm going to say that they're a 5% chance.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little higher than that. I'm going to put them at 20%. But man, their special teams have just been awful this season.
Yeah, we mentioned that in our midseason report. Really, really bad. A lot of bad indications about this team, as you've mentioned. But on the bright side of things, they do have Ilya Sorokin. He does have the ability to be one of the best goalies in the world. So if they have a hope, I think they do with Ilya Sorokin. So I'm going to put him at, I'm going to say 20% as well.
Yeah, great goalie. But we got to remember last year when they made their magical run to get into the playoffs, that Semyon Varlamov was a really big part of that story. He is on the shelf right now. Not sure when he'll be back. So I don't know. I think that's going to be too heavy of a burden on Sorokin.
Okay, next up, we do have a team that I would say is a bit of a surprise to be fighting for a playoff spot at this point in the season. We didn't have high hopes for them at the start, but the Columbus Blue Jackets do find themselves only a few points out of that last wild card spot. So what do we think about these guys?
It is a great story, especially, in Johnny Gaudreau's memory. It's so awesome to at least see these guys being competitive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A great story. We have to look at what's been going on recently, though. This team is starting to fade. The goaltending, it does not inspire confidence. I don't know. I think this team is trending down, and Monahan's out right now. Guys, this might sound really harsh. I'm giving them a 1% chance. I'm not going to give a 0. I'm going to say 1%. I think they're pretty much out, even though they're actually not that far out in the standings.
Yeah, they aren't that far out in the standings. I think they have been overperforming, but some bright spots for sure with some of their young guys. Kent Johnson has been great. Kirill Marchenko also having a pretty good season, and Adam Fantilli proving that he was worth that high draft pick. So some bright spots there. I'm not sure it'll be enough to get them into the playoffs this year. So I'm probably going to have to hover around a 10% stretch mark for these guys.
Good call, John. I'm going to put them slightly higher. I'm going to go with 15%. And I just love Zach Werenski. Man, if he could somehow get this team into the playoffs, he's got to be in the Norris conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. He is he really controls the game when he's on the ice, and he's on the ice for almost half the game.
Yeah, he jumps up into the play a lot. It's really boosted his offensive stats this year. He was also the top scorer at the Four Nations tournament. So, great year for him.
One more notable, the return of their captain could be a real boon to their playoff chances, as Mr. Jenner is back in his office, and starting to put up some points, playing that physical, rugged two-way game. So that's going to help, especially with Monahan on the shelf.
And last up, guys, we've got to talk about the Detroit Red Wings. Can this team fly? It seems like they're crashing to me.
Yeah, I was not high on them at the start of the year, and they've kind of had the year I expected. They're hovering around the playoff line, but there's just no, I don't know. It's the decor for me is the biggest issue.
Yeah.
Outside of Moritz Seider, maybe Edvinsson, there's not a lot to get excited about. A lot of underperforming veterans. I don't know. They don't have it. They just don't have it.
John, do you think they have the talent up front?
I mean, I do love Dylan Larkin as a player, but I wouldn't say he's an offensive game breaker necessarily. Lucas Raymond has emerged this year as a really, really talented setup man, but again, not a game breaker. Patrick Kane is having himself a good year, but he's definitely in the twilight of his career, so I don't really like their top-end offensive talent. And I just kind of don't really like the team's identity. I feel like this team is really lacking in identity. They don't know if they're coming or going. So, I don't know.
What would you put them at?
I guess
What's your stretch mark?
I guess I'm going to put them in about a 7%.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would probably
Seven,
put them at
that's
about, I'm going to say 10%. Mark, they did add another goalie.
Yeah, another mediocre goalie for their collection of mediocre goalies. It's just bizarre. Peter Mrazek, although he has played fairly well since being acquired, this is not the kind of guy that I'd hang my hat on in a playoff race. And because of this, I'm giving them a 5% chance. And frankly, I think I'm being generous.
And now let's go west, young men. We have some exciting playoff races.
Yes, well, let's start with nothing too exciting. A team that's kind of, ho-hum, but looks like they're in a pretty good spot. Minnesota is in the first wild card spot. I don't think they're going to fall out. They've got a big cushion. The one question, though, will we see Kirill Kaprizov this year?
That is a big question. Now, they're lucky. They had a great start. I think they've built up enough of a cushion. In my eyes, they're in.
Yeah, they play a good team game. They're a balanced attack. Lacking that pop, though, is going to hurt them once they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully he is back for the playoffs. It seems like there is no timetable, but he was having himself an MVP caliber season before he went out.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah, so, I mean, an amazing player. But yeah, I would agree. I think they're in, I'd say 95% chance.
I'm going to say 100. I just don't see two teams passing them. I say 100% they're in.
Sure, 90 for me.
Okay, next up, we have the Vancouver Canucks. This is a team that's very much a mixed bag right now. They shed JT Miller due to the ongoing problems he was having with Elias Pettersson. However, Pettersson has picked it up of late, and they're going to need him if they're going to have any chance of making it to the playoffs. So it's a little hard to say what to make of this team right now. Jeff, what do you think?
It's nice to see signs of life from Pettersson. They need him down the stretch. And Quinn Hughes has been healthy, right? He's all the difference for that team. So those two signs are very positive for Van.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'd use the word healthy to talk about Quinn Hughes. He's a tough kid. He's gutting it out. And honestly, if he drags Vancouver into the playoffs, if you think about what an MVP is, I would give him a vote for MVP. And I know that's a crazy thought, but that's how important he is to this team. But beyond him, I mean, you look up and down that lineup and, you want to talk about injuries. Connor Garland's banged up. Philip Hedl, unfortunately, concussed again. And we all know his struggles with concussions in the past. I just don't see a lot of guys who can score. I mean, Jake DeBrusk has the potential, but I don't know. I think when it comes down to it, they're just not going to have enough goals.
And will we see Thatcher Demko?
Yeah, I mean, there is some hope. He seems to be skating. He's traveling with the team, but his health has always been a question for the last several years. So, yeah, I don't know. It's looking rough for Vancouver on that front. And they need guys like Brock Besser. He's got to step up. They're not shooting the puck enough. Like Mark, you said, they're not scoring enough goals. So I don't know. I mean, if they do sneak in, I don't have high hopes for them to make any kind of run.
Okay. And John, what are your stretch marks for this team?
I'm going to have to say 33.33% for the Vancouver Canucks to make the playoffs.
1/3, I think, is about right. I'm going to go slightly lower. I'm going to say 30%. I must say that Kevin Lankinen has been a pleasant surprise this year. He's kind of keeping them relevant. If Demko does come back, that's a pretty decent 1-2 combo. I don't really love a lot of the other teams in the West, so that's why I'm going to go 30%.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to say 40%. I would like to see them in the playoffs.
Let's move on to the St. Louis Blues, who have been slowly creeping their way up the standings, knocking on the playoff door. And it's Robert Thomas and company, but especially their best player, Robert Thomas, over a point per game. And guys like Dylan Holloway, Pavel Buchnevich, Jake Neighbors, they've all been chipping in. So it's kind of scoring by committee in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And I'm liking what I'm seeing.
I do like that forward group. On defense, such a shame that Colton Parayko is done, right?
Yeah, that's a big loss.
But you look at that veteran decor. Fowler is done pretty well back there. Falk's been good.
Yeah, no, Fowler was such a good pickup from Anaheim. To get him for a second rounder was a stroke of genius.
But what about in net?
Well, I mean, Jordan Binnington coming off that amazing overtime in the Four Nations face-off tournament. And he is riding that. He's looking back like he's in 2019 form when he won the cup. I have a lot of confidence in this guy when he's on his game.
One more Jordan that deserves a note is Jordan Cairo as well. Another one of those, pretty talented offensive players helping St. Louis's attack.
I like what Montgomery has done with this team. I'm going to give him slightly better odds than Vancouver. I'm going to put him at, 45%.
Yeah, I agree. I think of all the teams fighting for that spot, they have the best chance. I'm going to agree with you, 45%.
Yeah, I think they do have the best chance as well. They are the only team with a positive goal differential as well. So I'm going to say 40% for the St. Louis Blues.
Next up, let's talk about the Calgary Flames. Now, this is a team that's defied expectations.
Yeah, I had no belief in them at the start of the year. Our last show, I doubled down on not believing in them. I'm tripling down. I am not high on this team at all. I mean, they just can't score. Who is the scariest offensive player on that team?
Yeah.
Nazem Kadri? Jonathan Huberdeau? I mean, this is, it's just ugly. And they tried to add Frost and Farabee from Philly. Those guys have done almost nothing since coming over. But they are a plucky bunch, so I can't give them a 0. I'll give them 5%.
5%, you say? Yeah, I mean, I got to say, I don't really believe in this team. Much like you, Mark, I haven't believed in this team all year. I do like Mackenzie Weegar. I think he's a very good defenseman. And he's
Rasmus Anderson, too, underrated defenseman. These are not world beaters.
No. And Rasmus Anderson has been pretty cold in the second half of this season here. I guess I'll say 10% for the Calgary Flames. Yeah.
Well, John, maybe I'm going to say 11%.
Oh, okay.
Just slight improvement there from me. I love the story of Dustin Wolf. I've talked about it a few times this season on the show. I think he's just an incredible goaltender. Somehow, some way, if this team ever made it into the playoffs, that guy has got to get some Calder votes.
Yeah, and they're going to have to do it without their captain, Michael Backlund, who is also injured. That's a big loss for them.
Okay, and the last team up in the West that is in a hunt for that wild card spot is the newest team in the NHL, the Utah Hockey Club. What do we think about these guys here, Jeff?
Well, one thing I would say is I like that move that they made in the offseason, Sergachev. They paid a pretty penny to get him, but he has been a legit number one. And two guys that were injured at the start of the year, Sean Dursey and John Marino, they're back and they're healthy. So that's nice. I don't mind that blue line.
Yeah, it is a pretty underrated decor. The one area that really concerns me is the goaltending. Now, Karel Vejmelka has been pretty good this year, just earned himself a new contract extension, actually. But he has been carrying a heavy load. Unfortunately, last year's standout goalie, Connor Ingram, has entered the player assistance program, dealing with the tragic loss of his mother. Our hearts go out to him. But Jackson Stauber has had to step in, and he's played 4 games so far. He's been okay, 912 save percentage, but I don't think they really trust him. And Vejmelka, I think, might start to wear down. So I think that's probably the biggest problem with Utah's run. With that having been said, I do like the youth, the energy, the new city. I'm going to give them 20%. What do you think, John?
20%? Okay, that's not bad. I do love the youth as well on this team. You got to love Logan Cooley. What an offensive talent he is. Great hands. Clayton Keller, of course, and maybe not part of the youth, but definitely that offensive pop.
He's still young. I still think he's got another level.
Yeah, he could have another level. I know that Dylan Gunther does have another level. This guy really could be a budding offensive star. Barrett Hayton as well, a different kind of player, but I think he's going to be a big part of that team moving forward. Just a more exciting season for Utah. The fact that they're still in the playoff hunt is great for the franchise. I don't think they're going to make it, though, but I'll give them a 15% chance. Such
a great story in Utah. I'm going to give them a mark at about 20%. So that about wraps it up, guys.
Well, hang on a second there, Jeff. There are still some teams jockeying for position near the top of the standings. We got to talk about some of these races as well.
Yes, the Oceans too, the Atlantic and the Pacific divisions have some exciting races for top seed and also for home ice in those 2 and 3 spots. So where do we want to start here?
Well, let's start with the Pacific Division because we've actually got a 3-horse race. The LA Kings have been coming on strong. Vegas still holding down the number 1 spot, but Edmonton is right behind them. So it really is wide open at this point.
Okay, so at the top, currently Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, this is a team that is not too far removed from winning a Stanley Cup. They have a lot of great depth. They have Mark Stone. They have Jack Eichel. I think that this team is probably going to hold on to it, but I mean, in a 3-horse race, giving them 50%, I think is a pretty decent stamp of approval.
I would tend to agree with you, John. I think from top to bottom, this team is just solid. I'm going to say 50%.
I think you guys are being a little bit generous, maybe underestimating the other teams. Shea Theodore has gone down with an injury. Aiden Hill has been good, not great. Don't really trust Samsonov as their backup. I'm going to go a shade lower at 45.
And Mark, what about your Stanley Cup pick, the Edmonton Oilers?
Yeah, I'm going to hang on to them as my pick. I think that for the division title, I think they're right there with Vegas at 45%. I do like the addition of Jake Wallman. Not sure if that was the right defenseman. They did need to add one. Goaltending's still shaky, though. But hey, you got Connor McDavid, you got Leon Draisaitl. You got a shot.
This team has been so streaky. What do you think, John?
I agree. They've been streaky, especially since the end of the break. They came out of the gate just pretty limp, to say the least. But like you said, they got the superstars. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to put them at a 35% chance of winning this division.
Not a bad call, Johnny. I'm going to put them at about 40%. They need more out of their veterans, Nugent Hopkins and Hyman.
Okay, I still think, though, guys, they were a game away from winning the Cup. Matthias Ekholm is now back healthy. I think they're even money with Vegas at this point. That's why I'm still saying 45.
So next up in third spot in the Pacific Division, we have the Los Angeles Kings. This is a team that has found itself in that spot several times over the past few years. This year, goaltending has been a big strength for them. Darcy Kemper, especially over the last little while. He's been playing very, very well. They're going to need him to continue that play. I just don't think they have the pop to really pass Vegas or Edmonton. I'm going to put them at about 10% chance to win this division.
I think I would probably agree with that, John. I put them in about 10%. They're a little bit of a long shot for me to win the division. One thing I love is the breakout of Quinton Byfield. Finally, looks like this guy's arrived.
Yeah, and Kevin Fiala, who had a really disappointing first half, has been better as well. He's been on that line with Byfield for a big part of that resurgence. You still got guys like Kempe and Kopitar, obviously, but Drew Doughty coming back. You look at Darcy Kemper's number getting better. Well, I think that has a lot to do with their best defenseman. So LA should not be counted out, but they do have quite a few points to make up. A couple games in hand, still got to win those games. I think LA is at best a 10% chance.
So do you think we're going to get another Edmonton versus LA matchup?
Oh, I hope not.
I think we probably are, I got to say. We'll cover that in our playoff show, but we'll see about that.
Yeah, I don't know, guys. I think the Oilers can still win the division title, though, so we could get a Vegas-LA matchup as well.
And let's move along to the Atlantic Division. And wow, are things tight there?
Yeah, this is the best race, I think. It's so intriguing. 3 teams that you could say are viable Stanley Cup contenders, and they're all neck and neck. Actually, Florida and Toronto at this point have the exact same record. It could come down to goal differential if it's between them two.
So who do you guys like to win the Atlantic?
Well, currently sitting atop the Atlantic is the Florida Panthers, defending Stanley Cup champions. I think this team looks pretty primed to repeat if everything goes as planned. They do have a couple injuries, though. Matthew Tkachuk is out, and Aaron Ekblad was busted for some PEDs.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was rough. So they're a little shorthanded here coming into the stretch run, but I do like their chances. I'm going to put them at a 35% chance, though, just because I think it's so tight.
Yeah, that's fair. They did make up for a couple of those guys, though. So Ekblad's out, but they did bring in Seth Jones, another big right-handed defenseman who can chip in both ends of the ice. And at forward, Kachuk's out, but they got another pest. Brad Marchand joins the team. So I think that will kind of help things. Marchand should make his debut with the Panthers probably at some point this week.
Yeah, I would probably put the Panthers in at about 40%.
Yeah, 40 seems fair, but guys, I'm only going to give them 25%. You'll understand more when we get to another team.
And who would that be?
Well, Jeff, let's move on to that team, the Toronto Maple Leafs. That's right.
Boy.
I think that this team is ready to take the next step, and it's going to start by winning the division, avoiding that nasty 2-3 matchup. And here's why. Austin Matthews is rounding into form. They've got 2 goalies they can trust. Usually it's 0. That's something. And last but not least, they made 2 solid acquisitions at the deadline. Lawton gives them a nice third-line center option. And I absolutely love the addition of Brandon Carlo. I know it was a down year for him in Boston, but Boston was just struggling. I wouldn't blame that on him. He's exactly what they needed, a shutdown right-handed defender.
As a Leaf fan, I wish I could share your optimism. Never before have I wanted the Leafs to win the first place so much than this year. It's so important.
It's crucial, yeah. You don't want to be in that 2-3 matchup. And Jeff, don't feel bad. I think they're going to do it. I'm going to say they're 50% to win the division.
Whoa,
yeah,
I
know.
like your optimism, Mark. I'm going to put them at 30.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I actually like the Leafs a little bit better this year. Craig Berube gives the team a very new look. I think that's going to make a difference here. And I think strong from top to bottom. I think with Florida, I think they're so evenly matched. I'm also going to give them a 35% chance to win the Atlantic Division crown.
Now, nipping at their heels are the Tampa Bay Lightning. Looked like they had taken a step back the last couple of years, but they're right back in contention. And I think that we cannot discount their chances with Andrei Vasilevsky looking like a world beater again. They've still got Victor Hedman. They've still got Braden Point, Nikita Kucherov, super dangerous. There's just so much talent on this team.
They also have Jake Gensel, who's been excellent in his first season in Tampa Bay. Love Hagel, right? Hagel has over 30 goals. The guy gets no power play time. He's been excellent.
Yeah, they brought back Yanni Gord as well, which I thought was a nice little under-the-radar move.
They also brought Oliver Bjorkstrand in, and Anthony Cirelli is a guy. Like, this is a team that's had their depth chipped away since their cup wins, but I feel like they're building it back up, preparing for another run here. So I really, really do like their chances. I'd put them just slightly below both Florida and the Leafs at 30%.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I've already given a 50% chance to the Leafs. I will respect the math, and I will give them 25%.
Yeah, Marky, I'm going to come in a little lower at 20%.
Now, as far as the other 2 divisions go, I think that both in the Metro and the Central Division, everything's kind of solidified. We know who the teams are going to be in the top 3 spots, so not much to say there. Great matchups in the playoffs coming up, though.
Yeah, absolutely. This is always a very exciting time of year, and of course, we can't wait to break down some of those other divisions in our playoff preview show. For now, though, I think, why don't we hit some of your questions with the mailbag?
Sorry. What was the question? I would totally veto that. What kind of league are we running here anyways? I'll have to consult the rule book on that one. Remember the trade guidelines. Can we get some friendly questions here? You guys have got to dress your players.
Okay, everybody, this is your favorite segment, Ask the Commish. You can still get your questions in last minute. Send us an email at rodlangwayfanclub@gmail.com. Send us a tweet at rodlangwayfanclub. You can write a message in the sky with your jetpack if you like. Any way you want to get us your questions, just do so. And anytime, really. Anytime. We're available whenever you want. Yeah. So what is up first?
Well, we've got a tweet here. Sarah from Moncton asks, with the success of the Four Nations Cup, will we be able to say goodbye to the All-Star game at some point?
Thanks for the question, Sarah. I certainly hope so. Wow, the Four Nations was awesome. Wasn't that incredible? Canada did it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Very high-level hockey, I must say. So fast, tight checking, physical. I mean, that first Canada-America game, those 3 fights in the first 9 seconds or whatever, that was highly entertaining. And of course, seeing Connor McDavid pot the OT winner, what a moment for him.
Yes, and John, you nailed it. Your prediction about Sidney Crosby, still got it.
He still has it, for sure. Connor McDavid, though, I mean, you predicted that it would be his tournament. I mean, I know he didn't score at the level he's capable of, but his moment was certainly the most dramatic of the tournament.
Hate to be the Debbie Downer on this one, but I think a lot of owners probably not happy about some of their big players getting injured. Guys like Charlie McAvoy, the Kachuk brothers both got banged up. And not to mention some other bumps and bruises, I bet, that haven't even been disclosed. So I don't think this is going to become a regular thing. If it happened once every 4 years, kind of like an Olympics, that would be cool. But I think we're kind of still stuck with the All-Star game.
Yeah, I wish we could get rid of the All-Star game, but honestly, I just don't see it.
Yeah, it generates revenue. It's more for the kids. We're not the target audience. Next year we do have the Olympics, but it sounds like they're going to go ahead with an All-Star game anyway, which is just bizarre to me. But hey, very, very on brand for the NHL.
Absolutely. Well, we may end up seeing a U.S.-Russia showdown. Oh, that's been spoken of.
That's another can of worms. Let's just not open that
we won't go
now.
there. We won't go there for now. But yeah, very, very entertaining tournament. Very physical, very fun. I think everything we wanted out of it, especially with the Canada win.
Running a little bit late here, guys. Let's do one more question.
Okay, well, we have a tweet here from Power Push, and he just writes, which deadline deal will have the biggest impact on the playoffs?
Thank you so much for the question. I'm going to go with the obvious one. Mikko Rantanen to the Dallas Stars.
Yeah, he is the best player that was traded. And Dallas is one of the big contenders for the Cup. In fact, I think they're the number one. If you look at betting odds sites, I think they're actually the favorite now. I think the Rantanen deal pushed them over the top. But I don't know. We've seen big players get traded before and fizzle in their first turn with a new team. I'm not convinced that it's going to be Rantanen.
Dallas did give up a lot. They gave up Stank.
Yeah, Stankoven.
Logan Stankoven. John, what do you think of this trade?
I really like the trade. I do. Obviously, Dallas was a very deep team. This just makes them deeper. However, I'm a little concerned about who Mikko Rantanen is. We saw him not perform particularly well in Carolina. Obviously, he was surrounded by a wonderful cast of characters in Colorado. So I don't know what kind of production we can expect out of him. This is a guy who's put 50 goals up and 100-plus points in the past. I'm not sure he's quite that player, but obviously it doesn't hurt to have him on your team going into the playoffs.
And he's not going to have to be that 100-point guy in Dallas, but it's always nice to have another scoring threat out there. I think he's going to fit in really nicely, especially on that power play one unit.
And which other trades stood out to you, Mark?
Well, mine is kind of what might be considered more of a medium-sized trade. Maybe not as sexy or as exciting. It's coming back to your Leafs, Jeff. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Brandon Carlo. This is going to round out your top four pretty nicely. Right-handed defenseman, not easy to come by. He's physical. He's got a lot of playoff experience. I think this is just what the Leafs needed. Again, not the best player traded, but I think there are going to be ripple effects down that D-core, and you can never have too many defensemen for a long playoff push, and that's exactly what the Toronto Maple Leafs are hoping for this year.
Okay, for me, I would have to say Brad Marchand to the Florida Panthers.
Is that right?
But yeah, I mean, I know he's a little long in the tooth now. He's probably not...
Rats do have long teeth.
Well, he sure does, yes. But, I mean, going into the playoffs, we're talking playoff performers. I mean, probably not too many better than Brad Marchand. This is a guy who can really stir the pot. Him and Kachuk...
Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, I could see these guys. And Bennett. I know. Like, these are guys who could really, really get under the other team's skins and really make them difficult to play against. So I think it's going to be a very impactful move.
I am shocked that Boston gave away their captain. Just blows my mind. One of the trades that kind of stood out to me was the Brock Nelson deal. A longtime New York Islander. Big change of scenery. He solidifies that second line center spot, which Casey Middlestad just didn't seem to fill.
Yeah, and he's out the door. Colorado does look scary. Rantanen's gone, but with that center depth, you still can put together two solid offensive lines.
Yeah,
so
Martin
watch out for
Necas
Colorado. Yes, he has.
Yeah, Necas has really fit in well there. Watch out for Colorado, absolutely. Jeff, you picked them to win the Cup with your do-over, didn't you?
Yes, and hey, I might do a do-over.
Well, yeah, they're screwed then if you pick them. I mean, you've ruined another team's chances.
Yeah, well, not looking that way just yet, but we will be coming back with all of these picks and predictions for the first round of the playoffs with our next show coming up in, less than a month.
And in the meantime, enjoy the stretch run. It's going to be a dogfight for those last few playoff spots. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And I hope you had yourselves a time.
Well, I hope you had yourselves a time. Hope you had yourselves a time. Hope you had time. Yourselves a time. Hope you had yourselves a time. Well, I hope you had. had yourselves a time. Hope